Hello friends, it's Bill and you're watching Bill's Box of Sound, and today's video is a review of the new 5-disc box set Waka Wazoo by Frank Zappa. And this is official Zappa release number 124. Now this boxed set is a celebration of the two albums that Frank made in 1972. The album credited to the Mothers as the Grand Wazoo, and the Frank Zappa solo album Waka Jawaka. Now, these two albums, there's a lot of Zappa fans that say that these are their favorite Zappa albums. Not everybody, but some. And there are also people that say these are the only two Zappa albums they like. Some people describe these two albums as big band Zappa or jazz fusion Zappa. And what happened is, after the December 1971 disaster where Frank was injured when he was pushed off the stage at the Rainbow, he spent most of the next year recuperating from that accident. Badly broken leg, just all sorts of things. And he did not stay idle. Most people would just take the time off, recuperate, get better. But no, he pushed forward, continued writing music, making music, organizing musicians. He never stopped working. And this is a wonderful example of all the music that was put together to make these two albums and more. So let's delve into it. Once again, produced by Joe Travers and Amit Zappa. There is a wonderful booklet that has, and check it out, two different views of the same shoot. This has lots of great pictures of all of the ensemble. And it was described as an electric orchestra. But a lot of times when people make rock and roll fusion or jazz fusion, it's too much jazz or it's too much rock and roll. Or if somebody says, I'm going to fuse a big band into this rock and roll arrangement, it's basically the horns doing a couple of little things while the rock band does its regular stuff. Nothing like this for Zappa. This was made from the ground up as a large ensemble with a lot of different things going on. And man, it's wonderful. Now, I know that there's some of you out there that are saying, now wait a second. Horns and saxophones and other jazz type instruments can be fused into rock and roll and vice versa. And can have really good stuff. And there's other bands like Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And there's also Chicago. Yeah, they had dedicated horn sections. And that was a rock band with a dedicated horn section. And, you know, saxophones and other things, and flutes and other things like that. But they were still doing rock music, not specifically a new kind of music or a dedicated instrumental type of music. And then there's other attempts to fuse rock and jazz, like Miles Davis' Bitches Brew. Now, this ain't a bad album. This is a classic, okay? But this music was pretty much put together by taking a whole bunch of musicians, putting them in a room, having them improvise, and then the producer went through everything and put together the best parts and made that into the album. That's not what Frank was doing. Frank was doing things where there were very tight arrangements, and there were parts with solos, but then there were also solos that were turned into tight arrangements. That's all over the place. And then there's things where somebody has something that's more of a pop or rock thing, and they try and do it with an orchestra. Ben Folds did a concerto for piano and orchestra. Keith Emerson had a piano concerto or a symphony. A lot of work went into that, but the results just weren't that great. So what I'm saying here is that Frank fused different types of music, and he elevated it to a different type of music that can only be described as Frank Zappa. The way that these two albums are put together and the procedure of Frank's compositional sequence elevates him on the same level as Duke Ellington, in my opinion. Your option, your mileage may vary, but I'm just saying that the music on these two albums is very unique and very Frank Zappa. There's only a few vocal tunes, but I digress. Let's get back to the review. Some great liner notes. There's Frank in a Wheelchair by Vaultmeister Joe Travers, as well as very detailed descriptions of the people who were on the album, as well as all of the sessions that went through it. There's also liner notes by Scott Parker, writer of many wonderful Zappa books, as well as the host of the Zappa Cast. If you haven't listened to it already, check it out. You'll get a lot of good information. So this album has 5 discs in it. Let's see. Disc number 1 has album recording session alternates and outtakes. And where's disc 2? Disc 2 continues with that. Now, as I said a little bit earlier, for a lot of people, this is an era of Zappa that they want to hear more of. And the posthumous releases have kind of honored that wish of Zappa fans with such things as Joe's Dommage, which was taken from a cassette recording of rehearsals of these bands. Also, a complete concert. 2 CDs, Zappa Wazoo. This is an entire concert of the Wazoo, sometimes called the Petite Wazoo instead of the Grand Wazoo Orchestra, that was recorded in Boston. And there's a track from this that's on the boxed set. However, it's not the same version that's on this thing. This is the unedited live performance. On here, there's a version that was edited and tweezed by Zappa in the studio. We'll get to that in a little bit. Then there was another release of recordings done in November and December 1972 called Little Dots. And this was a little bit smaller of an ensemble, but still quite a large band for Zappa. And this one came out in 2016. So let's take a look at these recording session alternates and outtakes. We've got the very first take of Your Mouth, which ended up on Waka Jawaka. A great stripped-down blues version of this song. You got a great alternate take of Big Swifty. A version of Eat That Question called Minimal Art. And this is version 1, take 2. A wonderful version, an outtake of Blessed Relief. Also, the outtake version of the Grand Wazoo, which is originally called Think It Over, and it had lyrics to it. And that's a little bit longer. There's also an outtake version of For Calvin and His Next 2 Hitchhikers, which lasts a little bit longer. And also an outtake version of Waka Jawaka, 13 minutes and 41 seconds. Now, the arrangements and the orders of solos are not the same as the original album. So you're not just getting multiple takes of the same arrangements, although that would be nice. You're getting things that were still in a developmental form. Frank still hadn't finalized the way that the song was going to be presented on the album. And the structure of the solos, the structure of the composition was constantly changing. And the multiple ways in which it was put together are wondrous. There's some solos on here that will just blow you away. The second disc continues all that. You got Cletus Auritus Auritus, a different version of it, very different version. Another version of Eat That Question, a little bit closer to the final version, but not the same. An alternate mix of Big Swifty, which is 14 minutes. An alternate mix of For Calvin and His Next Two Hitchhikers. An alternate mix of It Just Might Be a One-Shot Deal. An alternate mix of Waka Jawaka that's 15 minutes long, almost 16. Yet another version of Cletus Auritus Auritus, an alternate mix, and a alternate mix of Eat That Question. And portions of these even have some parts that wound up on the final versions. But like I said, alternate mix, alternate edits, all worth listening to. If you dig these two albums, Grand Wazoo and Waka Jawaka, you're going to enjoy this even more. So those two discs are an exhaustive document of the development of those songs, the recordings of those songs, and the different permutations that these took before their final versions. Very essential. And then on disc 3, there's George Duke demos, because at the same time, George used some of these musicians to record some demos for a George Duke album that came out. Now, none of these songs turn up on any George Duke albums. I've got 2 of the 3 that came out on MPS before he signed to Epic. I've got The Aura Will Prevail. I've also got Feel. And Frank plays guitar on this one. He is credited as Abdullah X. And also on The Aura Will Prevail, there's a version of Uncle Remus, not the same one that's on this box set. And there's also a version of Echidna's Arf. Very cool stuff if you are looking for it. And if you are a CD type kind of person, you can also find a 3-disc set. I don't know if it's in print anymore, called George Duke 3 Originals. It's got all 3 albums, the ones I just showed you, as well as the one called I Love the Blues, She Heard My Cry. But these songs that they were doing as demos for George, let's see, where did I just put that? Oh, here it is. Has these songs, For Love I Come Your Friend, Psychosomatic Dung, an instrumental version of Uncle Remus, which, if you listen closely, is the basic tracks for what became Uncle Remus on the Apostrophe album. A song that's just called Love. Then session outtakes of 3 of those tracks. And what's kind of odd is the tune For Love I Come Your Friend. The chord progression of that sounds a little bit like In a Silent Way by Miles Davis. If you're a Miles Davis fan, listen to it. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments. Tell me what you think. Anyway, so that's got 7 tracks. And then the rest of disc 3 and all of disc 4 is a full concert recorded at the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco of the Petite Wazoo Band. Plus, before all that starts, you get the edited version and the studio tweezed version of Approximate, live version from Boston, tweezed at the record plant by Frank Zappa. That's an 11-minute version. So in this concert, we've got the following tracks. Little Dots, an 18-minute version. A fantastic arrangement of America Drinks, originally found on Absolutely Free, and some early versions of songs that ended up on future Zappa albums, Montana, Farther Oblivion. Well, actually, Farther Oblivion did not end up on future albums. So this Farther Oblivion, which has ended up on some Frank Zappa bootlegs and also on a Frank Zappa authorized bootleg, starts out with parts of what was on Gregory Peccary, all instrumental, then goes into what would eventually become the Bebop Tango, and then, after a wonderful drum solo, goes into the melodies that made up the song Cucamonga from Bongo Fury, all in a 15-minute bunch of wonderment. Then we go into a version of Cosmic Debris, an early version, and a fantastic blowout of Chunga's Revenge, 18 minutes of wonderfulness on that. So that is the 4 discs that make up the plain old CD versions of Waka Wazoo. Then we've got disc number 5. Now, some people complain when they put out these boxed sets that, well, I don't get the original albums that this was about. How am I supposed to use this as a reference? Well, if you've already got the original albums, why duplicate such things? But this takes those complaints, answers them, and does them one better, because this is not a compact disc. This is a Blu-ray audio disc, and it's got the entirety of Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo in 3 different formats. First, high definition 96 kilohertz 24-bit stereo, mastered by the late great Doug Sax. These versions sound wonderful. You can go back and forth with the vinyl and make your judgment on what sounds better, but this is a really nice sounding version that I enjoyed. Second one is 5.1 surround mixes, newly constructed based on information that Frank had left and basic mixes that he had done but had not finalized of both the entire Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo albums. And then they take that, and the third version is Dolby Atmos. So if you've got a Dolby Atmos home theater system, you can enjoy this in all of its glory. Now, as I've explained on some other of my live streams, for several months, these 2 albums have been available on Apple Music as spatial audio. Now, if you've got an Apple TV running the most recent software and a home theater system that's hooked up to, you can listen to your home speakers with the whole Dolby Atmos surround sound effect. And you can listen to these mixes, which are very well done, because it doesn't sound like they're trying to reinvent the album like a lot of early quadraphonic mixes were. This explodes and expands the original mix and helps you to hear more detail, more instruments, more interplay. It doesn't spoil the original mix, it enhances it. And it doesn't have any of the gimmicky surround sound effects that has something going around, except for in the tune Waka Jawaka, Sal Marquez's trumpet solo. It has it going from one speaker, then to another speaker, then over to this speaker, then over to this speaker. But then later on, when all of the trumpet overdubs going along with Frank's guitar solo happen, you've got the trumpets all over the place and Frank's guitar in the middle. You can hear his guitar more, you can hear the trumpets more, and it all blends together into the wonderful piece that it was constructed bit by bit by bit by bit. I am thrilled about this, and I hope that we get to see more surround sound mixes of Frank in the future. I don't know if there's going to be any more. I know that both the Apostrophe and the Overnight Sensation albums came out in quad versions, and Frank may have been experimenting with other quadraphonic mixes as well, but if this is a start, it's a great start. So altogether, what do I think of this? This is a lot better than a lot of some of the boxed sets. It's not crazy expensive. Brand new, it's at like about a $65 price point. I got mine directly from Amazon.com. Now, I was also hoping to do a review of the remastered versions of both Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo. I ordered them on colored vinyl directly from Universal, but that shipment has been delayed by like more than 10 days. So I may do a separate video on a shootout between all the different versions of Waka Jawaka and Grand Wazoo that I own. But yeah, this is great stuff. Big band Zappa? Yes. Rock and roll with horns? Yes. Frank Zappa? Undoubtedly. All Frank Zappa, all the time. Wonderfulness, proof that this guy never stopped working. He never stopped making music, and he never failed to deliver excellence. So that's about all I got to say. If you like what you heard or I said, or if you got any questions, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, ask some questions. I'll be happy to respond. And had a great time. Hope you did too. Go out and listen to some Zappa. This is some great music. And there will be more.